Forgotten Sunrise. Chapter 8. Sunny and Shimmer go to Heights Castle.
Sunny, are you really sure this reunification thing went off without a hitch? I mean, I'm getting some stares here.
Sunset said, as they made their way west, away from Cantor Logic towards the coast, as the sky became a continually darkening orange. With the sun below the horizon, lampposts had started to flicker on. And while they weren't quite needed yet, they would be in about 15 minutes as dusk turned into night. Sunny did some quick glances and saw that a few ponies were indeed looking at the unicorn in passing. But the looks weren't worried, concerned, or scared.
I don't think it has anything to do with malice, Sunsets. I think they're just curious. You're the only pony I've seen with 2 cutie marks.
Sunny replied.
What are you talking about? I've only ever had the one.
Sunset said, glancing back at her flank, seeing the yellow and red yin and yang style sun.
No, I meant on both flanks. For as long as I can remember, ponies have only had one, on the right.
Sunny explained. Now Sunset joined in on the curious glances, and indeed confirmed that every pony's cutie mark was indeed on their right flank, and only on the right flank.
I don't suppose you have any theories for how that happened?
Sunset asked the Earth Pony.
I do actually, just one, now that I've seen the memory gems. My best guess is when Equestria lost its magic, ponies lost a cutie mark, because they had clearly lost a part of themselves. So, you know this place best. What are we doing for dinner?
Sunset asked as they came to Seaside Drive, the coastal road on the east side of town.
You like hamburgers? There's a new place called Heights Castle a couple of blocks down. It's the first Pegasus-owned restaurant in Maritime Bay.
Sunny answered. Sunset's mouth immediately began to water.
Oh, it feels like it's been ages since I've had a hamburger.
The 2 mares walked down the street, being passed by the trolley as it started its evening route. Coming up to the fast food establishment, Sunset saw that the exterior decor was indeed very castle-like. There was a small line going through the trot-through, so they elected to go inside to the front counter.
Sack of 10 hay sliders with cheese, please, and a medium drink.
Sunny ordered, before turning to Sunset, who quickly skimmed the menu.
Same, actually.
The unicorn replied. Sunny dug into her bit bag and paid the amount due, before stepping over to the opposite side of the counter. Their 20 sliders took no time to make, and 3 minutes later, they were sitting across from each other in a booth.
I wish I knew what a good starting off point was. So, what was this other world like? I don't suppose you have pictures?
Sunny asked, as she started into her first slider.
Actually, I do.
Sunset said, reaching into her saddlebags and came out with her yearbook, with her cutie mark engraved with gold on the front cover. She flipped it open, turned several pages, and turned it around to face Sunny when she came to the picture she was looking for.
My pitch?
Sunny asked, leaning over the table after she had swallowed her first bite.
Humans. Scientific name, Homo sapiens. The fingers took a while to get used to, as did walking on just 2 legs.
Sunset explained, as she flipped through more pages, coming to the sophomore year fall formal, with Twilight up on stage receiving the crown.
Looking back, being the protege of the ruler of Equestria was almost too easy. But that was probably because I was focusing on the wrong things, or not focusing enough on the right things. I still remember my entrance exam to her school like it were yesterday.
In the past, the filly felt as if she were walking on eggshells as she made her way down the hall to the assigned lecture room.
Nervous, Sunsets? Don't be silly, you've been preparing for this for weeks. Just take a deep breath.
Sunset looked up at her only company for the past 16 hours. Her mom, Stellar Flare. The train ride over here had been uneventful, but had done nothing to calm her nerves. They should have left a day earlier, so she could get a good night's sleep in a hotel bed, not trying to get a quick nap on a rickety train. As she got in line beside her mother, the only thing she could do is take a deep breath, and that didn't help much. She had been preparing these spells for weeks, true enough. She could perform these transfiguration spells in her sleep. But still, What if they weren't good enough? What if she wasn't good enough? She wished Sunburst was here. He was half the reason her chosen spells were as honed as they were. Her younger brother was right next to her, reminding her of pronunciations and flexion. Her whole family would be here with her right now, if Dad wasn't at home with him in Sire's Hollow, watching over him as he spends yet another day with that Starlight friend of his. Her mom would have to suffice. Who knows? In a few years, he might be in the school here with her. There were currently 5 ponies ahead of them in line. One of them would go in with her accompanying guardian. She would hear some hushed, muffled conversations through the closed doors, and then there was usually some flashing and glowing that would come through the windows for a few moments. The room must have had another exit because no pony came back, and the next one went in. By the time they moved up 2 in the queue, 5 more fillies and colts had gotten in line behind them. Over the next 10 minutes, they slowly moved towards the double doors, 1 pony at a time. The next colts to go in did as the rest did, stepped into the room, stated his name, then the other occupants of the room said some muffled dialogue. Except this time, after the flash of light, there was a puff of smoke that came out from under the doors, followed by muffled coughing fits on the other side. The filly next up in line looked a little concerned, but the door attendants didn't so much as flinch. They must have given time for the smoke to clear because it was another couple of minutes before the filly was allowed to enter the room. After that, things had returned to what could likely be considered normal for an application process like this. The filly went in, a few words were shared, followed by a few flashes of light. Next up was the colt right in front of her, who looked a bit nervous. Sunset was now close enough to hear the door on the other side of the room open and close. Then the colt ahead of her was ushered in along with his guardian, presumably his dad. When the door latched shut, Sunset and her mom took a few more steps forward to stand in front of the attendant, who was looking down a clipboard grasped in his magic. No books, no help from your accompanying guardian. All spells must be performed from memory, and lastly, the decision of the judges is absolutely final. Understood? The attendant asked them, with barely a glance up from the papers on his clipboard. Sunset merely nodded, while Stellar offered a clearly in response. There was another flash of light from through the thickly frosted windows. Another few moments of near silence. Then she heard the doors open and close on the other side of the lecture hall. The unicorn attendants opened the doors and ushered them in. Sunset wasn't quite sure how to judge the size of the lecture hall. There were 2 large windows on either side of a chalkboard on the front wall. A podium was in the front left corner, and 2 long royal blue banners hung between the windows in the left and right walls. There were 7 rows of orange chairs that took up half the room, and 4 unicorns sat in the top row, each with clipboards and wearing dress shirts, vests, and ties. Stellar stood off next to the podium while Sunset made her way to the center of the room.
Name, please?
The pink-haired mare on the right asked.
Sunset Shimmer,
She replied, taking a breath. They each quickly scribbled on their clipboards. Miss Shimmer, the floor is yours. Please demonstrate why you should be here at the School for Gifted Unicorns. The gray stallion on the other side told her. Sunset took another breath.
Thank you. Today I will be demonstrating transfiguration magic,
She announced. As she began to mentally recite the first spell to herself, she saw the center left judge, a light blue stallion, lean over to the center right.
Only the 12th one this weekend.
She heard him mutter, getting the slightest of smirks from the off-white brown-haired mare next to him. Suddenly, Sunset felt a twinge of annoyance at the 4 ponies observing her from the top of the room. These snooty high rollers were already bored with her, and she had barely spoken 2 sentences. One of them was apparently going to judge her not based on her performance, but on what he had already seen. This was what her nerves were so frayed for? She barely slept on the 3 a.m. train for this? She took that twinge of annoyance and anger, and took firm hold of it and stretched it out, as her horn began to glow. Squinting her eyes, she spotted the pen being held telekinetically by the stallion who had apparently seen his share of one of the most advanced schools of magic she had read up on and practiced.
Serpents!
She cried out, shooting a thin beam of orange light out at the pen, and he ducked, but the beam connected with his pen. He was just opening his eyes back up when he realized that he had lost the grip on his pen. or rather what used to be his pen. He let out a mighty shriek as a blue racer snake dropped down on the floor in front of him, and he scrambled up to the top of the back row of chairs in front of him.
Limax!
She said, having quickly turned her attention to the 2 pieces of white chalk on the chalkboard behind her. The 2 beams connected, and she took hold of them as they transformed, tossing them over the rows of seats, and before he knew it, 2 slimy white garden slugs landed on his clipboard with a plop.
Venia!
She called, shooting a beam up at the chandelier hanging from the ceiling. The golden arms holding the light suddenly warped and turned green, becoming vines as they began to stretch out across the ceiling.
Vira, Vira, Vira!
She shouted, firing 3 beams in quick succession at the chairs the other 3 shock judges were standing in front of. The trio of seats suddenly came to life, breaking free of their bolted positions on the tiled floor.
So many transfiguration spells in quick succession. Okay, you're in! Stop!
The pink-haired mare shouted, as her co-judge dropped his clipboard and it flipped end over end as it tumbled down 3 rows.
What? Stop already?
Sunset asked, her young voice dripping with annoyance and disdain.
I thought you had seen so much of this stuff this weekend. It's barely been 20 seconds!
Sunset glared angrily at the 4 judges, and her mother was equally shocked, having never seen her daughter perform that many spells so quickly. Both mares barely heard the other set of doors open.
That is enough, young lady.
Sunset's horn, still glowing brightly, turned to the new commanding voice in the room, and her demeanor changed almost instantly when she saw who had spoken to her. Celestia, ruler of Equestria and princess of the sun and moon. Sunset's anger didn't melt away entirely, but she was collected enough to close her eyes in concentration, and immediately nullified the spells she had just cast. The judge's pen clattered to the tile floor, the slugs became pieces of chalk, the center chandelier snapped back into place, and while the chairs would need to be bolted down again, they were again regular, inanimate chairs.
Princess, I do believe a 10-minute break is in order,
the stallion judge stammered as he collected his clipboard and pen.
Yes, I would say so. Please take those 10 minutes to remind yourselves to keep comments about previous applicants to yourselves, and keep such comments from influencing decisions on your current one, no matter how bad you believe their hearing to be.
Celestia told them, sternly. The judges collected themselves and filed out of the doors that Sunset and Stellar had entered through, while the princess's attention now turned to the filly on the main floor.
Miss Shimmer, would you and your mother please come with me?
Celestia asked, before turning to exit through the opposite doors. Mother and daughter took a moment before following Celestia through the doors.
Well?
Stellar Flare began.
I do hope the repair bill won't be too steep. Maybe we'll just be let off with a warning.
Sunset rolled her eyes. Like those pompous prissies didn't have something like that coming eventually with comments like that. Sunset followed her mom out into the hall, where Princess Celestia was waiting.
Ma'am, if you wouldn't mind waiting here. Miss Shimmer, a moment of your time.
Celestia asked, beckoning her forward as she walked down the hall. Sunset let out a quiet sigh, and followed the towering monarch down the hall.
Seems you put on quite a show there,
Celestia commented.
Look, Your Highness, I'm not terribly sorry for what I just did in there. I've spent months studying, weeks practicing, and hours just to get here, and to have them dismiss my demonstration before I've done anything.
Their demeanor can be a bit off-putting, I will admit,
Celestia replied, down to the filly.
But I do trust their judgment. This is my school for gifted unicorns, and we're looking for the best. Audition week can get a bit tedious, and they do the best that they can.
Sunset resisted the urge to roll her eyes again, with Celestia facing her this time.
No offense, Princess, but if I'm being kicked out, I prefer not to waste any more of my time. It's another 9-hour train ride home.
Well, let's not jump to conclusions so quickly, Sunset. I said we're looking for the best. Once my judges get themselves collected from your, shall I say, nature-filled display, I'm fairly confident that they'll tell me what you just did in there was more impressive than any exam they've seen all week. That you're potentially the best of the best.
Sunset's eyes widened, and her annoyed demeanor finally started to fade a bit.
Really?
She asked, and Celestia nodded.
You have incredible power and potential if that's what a filly of your age can manage in a few short months of studying and practicing. So before you go running to catch the next train, perhaps you'll consider accepting my offer of becoming my own personal protege here at the school.
Sunset's mouth now opens to join her widened eyes.
You'd receive one-on-one tutoring, your own private study here on campus, and the chance to hone these abilities of yours into something amazing. You could be one of the greatest students this school has ever seen. What do you say, Sunset?
Unable to bring any words out of her throat, Sunset merely nodded silently.
In that case, congratulations, Sunset Shimmer. Let's go see how surprised your mom is when we tell her that the two of you will be dining with a princess tonight.
Back in the present.
Wow, that must have been some exam.
Sunny commented, now halfway through her sack of 10 hay sliders.
I wish I could say I was a model student. Sure, back then I thought I was the greatest thing since sliced bread. But I always wanted more, and I wasn't the slightest bit interested in any lessons of Celestia's that didn't directly involve magic. Like humility. Like making friends.
Sunset paused as she was considerably behind Sunny in terms of the amounts of her order that she had eaten, as she had been the one telling the story so far.
I never got any better. Once I had a lengthy talk with Twilight, how she had played her part in fulfilling a prophecy that Celestia was hoping to complete and free her sister, I couldn't help but wonder if that was why she was so patient with me. That if she wasn't looking for some pony powerful enough to help free her sister, that maybe she would have kicked me to the curb long before she eventually did.
Sunset paused again to sip at her soda.
She kept insisting that I wasn't ready, but I was a broken record asking about that magic mirror. Once I realized that my persistence wasn't going to get me anywhere with her, that's when I started going behind her back. Breaking into one of the school's restricted sections was the last straw. I kept telling myself that I was ready, that I could control darker knowledge that was kept behind locked doors. She formally ended my studies and escorted me out. When I saw my chance, I jumped through the mirror. At the time, it was only open for 3 days, every 30 moons. I knew I wouldn't get another chance, so I decided to take my chances. I knocked out my escort, easy enough spell, and jumped through, coming out, looking like that.
Sunset explained, pointing a hoof at the photo in the yearbook.
Once enrolled in the school over there, my mind was on one thing: getting revenge. And I was ready to play the long game. In my mind, I could have ruled Equestria, and she was holding me back because she was afraid of what I could do. What I could become.
Sunny saw how the unicorn's words ate at her. It clearly wasn't a pleasant subject.
After about a year, I went back through the mirror to Equestria during a royal summit to take Twilight's crown when I learned about the elements of harmony. She gave chase back through the mirror to the other side and figured out how to get to it before I did, as well as start to undo all the divisiveness I had sown. I wasn't a good pony back then. Just so much tunnel vision. Dead set on vengeance. I still look back and just chuckle at the ludicrousness of it all. Like, what was I gonna do? Seize Canterlot's throne with a few hundred mind-controlled teenagers turned equines? With 3 of the most powerful figures in equestrian history waiting right there on the other side of the portal? Luckily, Twilight and the versions of her friends over there weren't having any of it, and stopped me right there. That, fortunately, was the lowest point for me.
Sunset explained.
You didn't come back immediately?
Sunny asked.
I'm sure it crossed Twilight's mind, but she decided to leave me there with the mirror versions of her friends. So I could finally start to learn what Princess Celestia tried to teach me for so long. It wasn't easy. Some days I didn't want to get out of bed, but I slowly made it up to everybody. To my friends, my classmates, to the staff. When magic started to leak across dimensions, not just from the portal, but from other places over there, I was there to help. Quite a few equestrian artifacts had popped up over there. Things eventually began to quiet down as I closed in on my 4th year over there. And I started thinking more and more about how homesick I'd gotten. I mean, I won't keep going on, you've already heard the story this morning.
Sunny, now nearly done with her food, cleared her throat and took a sip of soda.
It may not be where you intended to end up, but I'm glad you're here, Sunset.
The Earth Pony told her.
You may not be a princess's protege or archmage anymore, but you know what? You can be a living example of everything Princesses Celestia and Twilight taught you.
Sunset smiled at the Earth Pony.
Thank you, Sunny. That means a lot.
She replied, finally starting to dig into the bulk of her food.
I think I do want to travel a bit, see what's become of Equestria in all this time. But first, I want to take a look at Canterlogic. Do they do tours over there?
Sunny nodded.
They certainly do. I can go with you tomorrow. I know Sprout has already started work on the trailer attachment for the truck, and he'll want my feedback. I'm sure Toots or Phyllis can arrange a tour for you.
Awesome. In the meantime, I think I'll get in touch with Princess Pip about seeing more of Zephyr Heights. I watched some of her videos earlier today. I wonder if she live streams video games.
Dude, the whole time I couldn't stop thinking about White Castle. Oh my god, it's so good. Anyways, let's get on to our passionate donators. Top donators are 630, TacoCat598, Only One Thing, Ceru Orion, and IronSky. Darkside, Rayden, Narwhals, Blackmoonheart, Pastel Skies, Austin Rolan, Stu Hex, Swordbrother, Mordred, Omicron, Lyrae, Will, Chris, Twinkie, Ridesoul, Badass Waffle, Shadow Moon, Luigi88, Chancellor Crust, Big Smoke 369, Bobcat GJF, and many more exotic donators. Thank you all so much for watching this video and live life to the fullest.